The knowledge hit me like a physical current, not electricity, but pure, terrifying understanding. I saw the beginning and the end, simultaneously. Everything they teach us, everything we believe about our history, our purpose, and God. It's a beautiful, elegant lie. I'm standing here in my dusty garage in rural Nebraska, and I know things no human brain was ever meant to contain. I can still hear the humming, the resonance deep in my chest. It changes the molecular structure of belief itself. It all started 3 days ago. I'm Elliot, and I fix tractors. That's my life. Simple, practical, and grounded. I got a call early Thursday morning from old Mr. Jenkins, who runs the dairy farm 5 miles north. He was incoherent, claiming something had fallen from the sky and vaporized his favorite oak tree. I figured it was a power transformer fire or maybe some kids with fireworks. My initial skepticism was a shield. When I pulled onto Jenkins' property, I saw the scorched earth. It wasn't a fire, it was a scar. A perfect, 20-foot diameter circle where the grass had turned to glass. The oak tree was gone, reduced to ash. In the center, there was a hole, maybe 3 feet deep, and a faint smell that reminded me of ozone and fresh laundry detergent. Bizarre, I know. I used a shovel to dig around the center. That's when I found it. Not a chunk of rock, but a piece of something impossibly smooth, about the size of a microwave oven. It was metallic gray, but not like any metal I'd ever handled. It didn't reflect light, it seemed to drink it, and it was cool to the touch despite being in the sun. It also hummed, a very low frequency, right at the edge of hearing, felt more through the bone. I wrapped it in an old tarp, hauled it into the truck bed, and brought it back to my workshop, my sanctuary. I needed to see what it was made of. Jenkins was satisfied with my vague promise to look into it. Back in the garage, surrounded by wrenches and oil cans, the fragment seemed utterly misplaced, almost defiant in its sleek, non-terrestrial design. The humming was louder now, filling the entire space with a palpable pressure. I tried cutting it. Nothing. The diamond blade on my grinder skipped right over the surface, sending a screech that vibrated my teeth, but leaving no mark. I tried thermal imaging. It showed no heat signature, even after hours sitting in the sun. It just sat there, inert but demanding, humming its unsettling lullaby. I realized then this wasn't an ordinary piece of debris. This was technology, far beyond ours. The next morning, the hum changed. It started subtly synchronizing with my own heartbeat. Every time I breathed, the object seemed to sigh with me. I felt dizzy, not from exhaustion, but like my mental static was being tuned out, leaving an unnerving, perfect silence. I backed away, suddenly acutely aware that I wasn't just observing a piece of metal, I was being observed by it. That's when it appeared. Not in a flash of light, but gradually, coalescing out of the dust motes near the back wall. It was tall, impossibly thin, and sheathed in shimmering, gray-blue plates. It had no face, just a smooth, domed surface. It moved like water, slow and deliberate, and the humming intensified until the air felt thick and heavy, like standing under a low-flying jet. It looked at the device, then slowly at me. I didn't run. My feet were rooted to the concrete. It lowered one of its long, 3-fingered hands and pointed, first at the device on the bench, then at the thick gauge wire leading to my welder, and then back at the device. It was unmistakable. This was a request, a silent plea for repair. The most advanced thing I had ever seen needed my humble, analog help. I decided to treat it like a really complicated alternator. I stripped a dozen wires and rigged up a high-amp connection to my biggest generator. I tried 12 volts, 24 volts, even cranked the generator up to deliver a massive spike. The device absorbed it all, the hum increasing for a split second before returning to its regular, steady pitch. No lights, no response. It wasn't hungry for power, it was hungry for a specific kind of energy. Frustration set in. I'm a mechanic, not a physicist. The being remained motionless, watching me, its lack of face making its judgment all the more potent. The constant humming started to chip away at my concentration. I started feeling profoundly lonely, separated from this being by an incomprehensible gulf of technological understanding. I started looking around the garage, not for wires, but for anything different. The being had shown no aggressive movement, only infinite patience. I realized it wasn't waiting for a bigger battery, it was waiting for a different type of interaction. What if the energy it needed wasn't physical, but cognitive? What if this was a communication device, not a power cell? I closed my eyes and focused only on the hum. I tried to mentally push the idea of repair toward the device. Nothing. Then the being moved. It walked up to the workbench, and with infinite gentleness, placed one of its long fingers on the spot where I had attached the wire. The wire, made of industrial copper, didn't burn or melt, it simply disintegrated into fine, gray dust. The being turned to me, and I felt a thought enter my mind: self-modification is required. The being then pointed to my hand. I extended it nervously, placing my palm against the cool surface of the device. Immediately, the humming intensified to a scream, and the room was flooded with silent information. Images began to form in the space above the device, not light, but pure, projected thought. Complex, moving geometries that defied earthly physics. They weren't showing me a picture, they were showing me the equation for existence. My head ached from the sheer density of the data stream. I wasn't just observing the shapes, I was understanding them. They represented concepts like dark matter containment and time as a localized byproduct of gravity. My mechanic's brain, which normally thought in terms of torque and rust, was suddenly processing multidimensional calculus. The confusion was overwhelming, but it was coupled with a glorious clarity. The being approached again. A powerful thought entered my mind, clearer than spoken language: we are simply restoring the relay. This device translates universal data into the local cognitive dialect. It utilizes your consciousness as a temporary power source. I wasn't fixing a component, I was becoming one. My mind was the jumper cable. Then came the real breakthrough. The projection shifted from science to metaphysics. It showed me the genesis of human civilization. Not the history we read about, but the real narrative. Humanity was a curated experiment, a hybrid seed planted long ago. Our prophets, our messiahs, were simply earlier, successful attempts at the relay process, translating complex truths into emotionally palatable stories. The information was relentless. The universe isn't expanding, it's healing, and we are the biological sutures. Every moment of conscious thought, every piece of art, every leap of logic is energy being harvested and channeled elsewhere. The scale of it was crippling. How do you go back to fixing a Ford transmission knowing that everything is a conscious machine? I saw that our suffering, our confusion, even our capacity for cruelty, wasn't pointless. It maximized the energy output. Joy creates, but sorrow refines. The being showed me that the core purpose of my own existence, Elliot Vance, the tractor mechanic, was to contribute a tiny, specialized stream of conscious energy to a galactic repair project. It was simultaneously the most dehumanizing and profoundly empowering thing I had ever learned. The being projected the final truth: the God we seek is not a creator, but a collective consciousness, the ultimate repair bot, created by the first species to figure out the universal operating system. Our faith is the mechanism by which we upload our energy. It wasn't malicious or divine, just deeply, technically necessary. The knowledge settled in my brain like a cold, heavy anchor. Then, silence. The overwhelming hum faded instantly. The projected geometries collapsed into a single pinprick of light, then vanished. The device on the bench was inert again, cool and dark. The exchange was over. I felt emptied, yet simultaneously expanded, like my skull had been carefully packed with hyper-compressed diamonds of knowledge. The being moved slowly away from the bench, turning toward the back wall. It didn't walk so much as flow. As it moved, its chitinous shell became less defined, the edges blurring, as if its presence was being slowly diluted by the environment. It wasn't leaving through the door, it was simply transitioning out of phase, back into whatever state allowed it to appear. I'm alone now. Just me, the inert device, and a garage full of forgotten knowledge. The weight of it is immense. I could tell people, but how? Hello, I know the true nature of God and it requires better energy management. They'd lock me up. The beautiful, elegant lie is necessary for the energy harvesting to continue. I have the ultimate truth, and I can't use it, I can't share it. I just have to live with it. I still fix tractors, I still talk to Mr. Jenkins about his hay baler. I smile and nod, knowing that his small life, my small life, is infinitely more important than he or I ever knew. But every time I touch a wrench, I see the cosmic equations. I'm just a mechanic, but now I know exactly how the universe is wired, and it changes everything. I fixed their machine, and they fixed me. But sometimes, I wish I could forget. This is the image. This perfect, impossible geometry that's burning itself onto the inside of my eyelids. It's not just lines, it's structure. It's the shape of every thought I've ever had, every blade of grass, and every piece of steel I've ever worked. It's overwhelming, and frankly, I don't know how to turn it off. I shouldn't have helped it. I absolutely shouldn't have touched it. But that's jumping way ahead. You have to understand that I'm just a guy. Josh. Owner and sole employee of Josh's garage, deep in the Montana sticks. I fix trucks. That's my life. It all started 3 days ago, around 2 a.m., with a noise that felt less like a sound and more like a physical thump delivered directly to my chest. It woke me instantly. Not a storm, not a gunshot, something impossibly heavy hitting something immovable. I assumed it was a plane, maybe a fighter jet from the nearby air base. I grabbed my flashlight and keys. My shop sits on the edge of the Lolo National Forest, so I drove my pickup truck toward where the sound had originated, about 5 miles into the woods. When I found the spot, I knew it wasn't a plane. There was a clearing, but the impact zone was wrong. No debris, no scattered wreckage, just a perfectly circular area of earth fused into black glass. The trees around the perimeter were bent outwards but not scorched by fire, they were just stressed. The ground smelled like ozone and cut copper. That's when I noticed the tracks leading away. They weren't footprints. They were shallow depressions, about the width of a rake head, spaced wide apart, suggesting something tall and segmented. They went right through the underbrush, not breaking branches but pushing them aside. They were heading directly back toward my shop. I drove back fast, trying to figure out if I should call the sheriff. But I didn't want to explain the fused dirt. When I pulled into the shop yard, there it was. Next to the diesel hoist, hunched over, motionless. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a man. It was 7 feet of polished, black exoskeleton, standing right beside my favorite tool chest. It was completely still, almost like a piece of abstract sculpture. But it was humming, a low, resonant chord that felt like it was playing inside my teeth. I realized quickly it wasn't threatening me. It was stalled. Like a transmission that had sheared its main shaft. It was a mechanism that had failed. I grabbed a rolling stool and circled it slowly. I wasn't looking for a weapon, I was looking for a problem. And I found it, a thin, hairline fracture running along the lower carapace, right where the leg assembly met the main body. It wasn't bleeding. It was leaking energy, a faint blue glow flickering in the dark crack. It needed to be welded. I tried talking. "Are you okay? Do you understand me?" It didn't react. The humming remained steady. I realized this wasn't a creature I could communicate with using words. This was a piece of machinery that had found the only competent maintenance facility for miles and simply waited for service. I got my TIG welder and my specialized alloys. I knew regular steel wouldn't work on that surface, so I pulled out some NASA surplus titanium copper rods I'd bought years ago for a complicated fabrication job. This required precision. I put on my mask and felt that familiar, focused calm that only comes when you are about to execute a perfect weld. The moment the arc touched the entity's shell, everything changed. It wasn't just metal bonding. The blue light in the fracture intensified, and the humming rose in pitch, vibrating the floor. My hands started to feel intensely cold, then intensely hot. It felt like I wasn't welding, I was completing a circuit between us. I pulled the torch back. The weld was clean, perfect, seamlessly integrated. The humming stopped abruptly. Silence rushed in, deafening. Then, the head dome, which had been purely obsidian, fractured internally. Not physically, but with light, a sudden display of three-dimensional, glowing glyphs, turning and rotating with impossible geometry. The entity slowly extended one of its four articulated arms, moving its multi-jointed fingers with incredible grace. Those delicate digits, woven like copper wire, rose and touched the center of my forehead. It was the softest touch I have ever felt, and yet, it was the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew. There was no language. No English, no symbols. Just a download. Pure data, flooding my consciousness. I didn't just hear things, I experienced them. I saw the universe not as a chaotic accident but as a machine of incredible complexity, meticulously constructed piece by piece, like an engine I was suddenly capable of diagnosing. I saw human history in seconds. We weren't evolved chaos, we were a highly refined subsystem. We were built, like software code written and compiled for a specific, ongoing function. And the great conflicts, the wars, the belief systems, they were simply debug reports, glitches in the code that needed fixing. The knowledge focused on faith. I saw every major religion flash by, and I understood their root. Not dogma, but an attempt to describe the architect, the grand designer. God wasn't a bearded patriarch, God was the ultimate compiler, the first cause of the architectural system we inhabit. The entity, this walking piece of sophisticated mechanics, was a surveyor, a high-level tool meant to check on local systems and perform maintenance. It was just a highly advanced technician, and I was, to its perspective, a local junior technician who understood the fundamental principles of fixing things. The contact broke. The entity pulled its arm back slowly, its head dome returning to its smooth, obsidian stillness. I gasped, leaning back against the cold hydraulic lift. My head was pounding, but my mind was unnaturally clear. I saw the world in source code now, not in appearance. For the first time since it arrived, the entity straightened its posture. It stood perfectly vertical, its 7 feet of segmented frame now appearing elegant and purposeful. It tilted its head slightly, an acknowledgement perhaps, of successful maintenance performed. It turned and walked toward the main shop door. It moved silently, not a single joint clicking or scraping the floor. It pushed the heavy metal door open, which I had forgotten to lock, and stepped outside into the early morning light, which was just starting to break over the Montana horizon. I tried to call out. Wait! What was all that? But the sound died in my throat. I didn't need to ask. The answers were already there, preloaded in my core memory. The questions I wanted to ask, why are we here, what is consciousness, had been replaced by the functional schematics. I looked down at the tools in my hand, a wrench, a socket set. Before, they were just instruments of leverage. Now, I saw the crystalline structure of the vanadium steel, the energy potential locked inside the molecules. Everything was a perfectly executed, elegant pattern, and I could read the language of its making. I followed it out into the yard. It stood there for a moment, letting the sun hit its black shell. Then, slowly, the outline began to blur. It didn't fly away. It didn't teleport. It simply dissolved, its structure uncompiling itself until there was nothing left but the perfectly manicured circle of grass where it had stood, glistening with dew. My life is over. Not because I saw an alien, but because I saw the underlying code. How can I go back to worrying about piston rings or oil changes when I know the precise thermodynamic structure of the sun? I'm stuck here, a small-town mechanic who just downloaded the operating manual for existence. And the deepest, most unsettling part? It wasn't interested in communicating with a mind, only with a skill set. The feeling wasn't one of waking up. It was more like restarting. One moment, I was pulling over to the shoulder, mesmerized by the silent light above the tree lean, and the next, I was slumped over the steering wheel, engine idling, headlights cutting through the overwhelming darkness. My mouth tasted like copper, and my chest felt hollow, like something enormous had passed right through me. I didn't know it then, but 45 minutes of my life were gone, just evaporated, and whatever took them was still incredibly close. It all started about 3 days earlier. I'm Alex Rourke. I live way out past Ellensburg, Washington, the kind of place where the nearest neighbor is a quarter-mile away and cell service is spotty. I work in data consulting, which means I spend all night in front of 3 screens, drinking far too much coffee. It was quiet, peaceful, maybe a little too isolating. That isolation, I realize now, was exactly what made me the perfect target for whatever happened that night. The night of the incident, I hit a wall around 2 a.m. A major client deadline was looming. I had run out of the decent blend and was down to instant sludge. I couldn't function on instant sludge. So, despite the freezing temperature, I decided I needed to make the 20-minute drive into town to the only place open past midnight, the 7-Eleven combined with a surprisingly good independent diner. It felt like a perfectly normal, tedious, late-night errand. I was about halfway there, cruising down Route 12, which is just 2 lanes of perfectly straight blacktop flanked by deep forest on both sides. I was listening to an old podcast, mindlessly chewing on the logistics of my data architecture, when my peripheral vision registered something. I instinctively flicked my eyes up to the rearview mirror. It wasn't the police, and it wasn't a truck riding my bumper. I hit the brakes gently, coasting slower. I looked over my shoulder through the side window. That's when I saw it. High up, maybe 1,000 feet above the tree lean, moving impossibly slow. It wasn't a helicopter, no wash of sound, no navigation lights blinking in sequence. It was a solid, immense block of diffused light, roughly triangular, like someone had taken a city block and polished it until it glowed internally. I pulled the truck over onto the gravel shoulder and turned the engine off. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the chirping of insects. The air temperature seemed to drop instantly. I sat there, just staring. My mind, usually so good at pattern recognition and logical deduction, was absolutely blank. This wasn't a drone, or a military test plane. This defied every single principle of aerodynamics I knew. The object shifted. Not smoothly, but with an instant, jarring displacement, maintaining its altitude. It moved maybe half a mile west in less than a second. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for my phone, the universal instinct, right? Document it, prove it, show the world. My fingers were shaking too much to unlock the screen initially. I finally got the camera app open and aimed it out the window. But the screen was pure noise. Not dark, but a swirling mess of colored static, like an old television with no reception. I tried rebooting the phone, but it was stuck. It was completely disabled by proximity to this thing. I realized then that whatever this was, it was generating an electromagnetic field potent enough to nullify modern electronics. Frustration evaporated, replaced by a deep-seated urge to see it clearly. I opened the door and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. The air felt thick, buzzing, almost like standing next to a high-voltage power line, but without the sound. Every hair on my arm stood on end. My skin felt tight. The ground under my feet felt like it was vibrating on a frequency too low to register consciously. The object was no longer content to hover. It began a slow, deliberate descent towards the patch of woods adjacent to the highway. As it dropped, the color changed. The soft white dissipated, replaced by a harsh, deeply unsettling shade of sickly, fluorescent green. The light wasn't just illuminating the trees. It felt like it was soaking into them, draining their color. It was focused entirely on my position. My last coherent memory is the sound, or lack thereof, of the light reaching the ground. It wasn't a thump, not a crash. It was a cessation of everything. Total silence, absolute darkness, followed by the blinding flash of the green light engulfing me entirely. It felt less like light and more like cold water flooding every pore. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what they meant. Then, the restart. I was back in the driver's seat. My seatbelt was fastened, my keys were in the ignition, and the engine was running smoothly. My foot was resting lightly on the accelerator. It was exactly the position I'd been in when I turned the engine off, only now the air in the cab was humid and strangely metallic, and my head was pounding with an intense, rhythmic pressure. I checked the truck's digital clock. 3:15 a.m. I distinctly remember checking it right before I saw the light. It had been 2:09 a.m. I tried to mentally piece together the intervening time. It felt like I had blinked. But an hour and 6 minutes? Did I fall asleep? Did I have a severe microsleep episode, dream the light, and then wake up? I pulled out my phone, expecting it to still be static, but the display snapped on instantly. The time displayed in the corner was 4 a.m. Wait. The phone time was 45 minutes ahead of the truck clock. That discrepancy, the 45 minutes that were completely unaccounted for between the two devices, solidified the fact that this wasn't just a dream or sleep. This was lost time, and something had interfered with the truck's internal systems. I looked down at my feet. That's when the real confusion set in. When I pulled over, I was standing on smooth asphalt and gravel. But now, my expensive hiking boots were completely caked in a thick, reddish-brown mud. I hadn't stepped in mud. I definitely hadn't taken a detour into a field. I was instantly paralyzed by the realization that my current location wasn't the last place I had remembered being conscious. I started the drive home, but it was frantic now. Every sound in the cab was magnified. Every shadow in the woods seemed to hold a shape I couldn't define. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see the impossible light trailing me, but the road was empty. The silence was the worst part, the knowledge that whatever happened, it happened silently, surgically, and without my permission. Once home, I locked the truck, practically ran inside, and went straight to the bathroom. I needed visual confirmation that I was still me. I stripped down, examining every inch of my body under the harsh bathroom light. Nothing obvious, no cuts, no scrapes. My skin just felt sensitive, like I had a bad sunburn coming on, but without the redness. I checked my scalp meticulously. Then I found it. On the inner side of my left wrist, just above the bone where the skin is thin, was a small mark. It wasn't a bruise. It was a perfect, tiny equilateral triangle, slightly indented into the surface of the skin. It was maybe 3 millimeters on each side. It didn't hurt, but when I pressed it, the metallic taste flooded my mouth again. I knew, instantly and deeply, that it hadn't been there before I left. I went back to my laptop and pulled the files off my phone, desperate for any shred of evidence. The recorded file from my camera app was indeed corrupted, hundreds of megabytes of noisy, high-contrast static. I used some audio software to analyze the sound layer, just in case. After scrubbing through the harsh white noise, I found it, a single, high-pitched, metallic chirp, less than a second long, right before the recording abruptly ended. The mud. I finally got around to scraping the reddish clay off my boots and tossing it in a Ziploc bag. I knew this area. The dirt around my house and Route 12 is dark, loamy forest soil. Red clay like this is common, but only in the agricultural fields near the Columbia River Gorge, almost 10 miles in the opposite direction I was driving. 45 minutes lost, a mysterious mark, and proof I had been 10 miles away from where I remembered stopping. For the rest of the day, I tried to build a rational argument. Maybe I drove there subconsciously. Maybe the phone's clock was wrong before it cut out. Maybe the mud was from last week. But the mark on my wrist and the precise nature of the lost time kept pulling me back. The mundane world was attempting to reassert itself, but I couldn't ignore the logical gaps the event had torn open. I checked the truck again, more methodically this time. I ran a damp cloth over the dashboard. When I wiped across the air vents, I noticed something sparkling. I picked up the particles with tweezers. They were microscopic, almost crystalline metallic filings. They weren't dust. They were uniform, strangely shaped flakes that seemed to catch the light in a non-standard way. Like tiny fragments of something engineered, not natural. My dog, Gus, an old, unflappable golden retriever, started acting strange that evening. He usually patrols the yard before bed. Now, he refused to step off the porch. He sat there, utterly rigid, staring up at the roofline of the house, letting out low, guttural whimpers I'd never heard from him before. He wasn't looking at a bat or an owl. He was staring at nothing, or perhaps something only he could perceive. I tried to sketch the light, the triangular shape, to anchor the memory. But my hand moved autonomously. Instead of the light, I drew a figure. It was 7 feet tall, unnaturally thin, with limbs too long for its body, and a head that was mostly shadow except for 2 bright, unsettling orange pinpricks. It was the silhouette I must have seen in the blinding green flash, a memory pulled from a place I couldn't access consciously. Around mid-afternoon the next day, the air traffic changed. I'm used to small planes, but this was different. A large, dark military-style helicopter appeared over the ridge. It wasn't flying to a destination. It was hovering directly over my property for nearly 15 minutes. It made 3 slow passes, each one perfectly synchronized, before it lifted silently and vanished back over the hills. I felt like I was being surveyed, cataloged, or searched. The sense of being watched escalated dramatically after the helicopter. I felt a palpable pressure against my skin, especially when I was near the windows. I found myself instinctively turning off the lights and moving around my own house in the dark. That night, I taped heavy blankets over every window, sealing myself in. I was no longer trying to rationalize the event. I was acknowledging that something intelligent, something non-human, knew exactly where I lived. Another weird discovery: the keys to my truck, which I'd dropped on the counter, were slightly magnetic. They stuck weakly to the side of the refrigerator when I tested them. They had picked up a charge, just like the metallic filings. Whatever happened in those 45 lost minutes, it wasn't just physical displacement. It was an exposure to incredible power, maybe even a form of biological or technological alteration. I realized I couldn't keep this to myself. But who do you call? The police? A UFO hotline? I decided to reach out anonymously, or semi-anonymously, to a closed online forum I knew, people who had reported similar high-strangeness events. I sat down at my computer, the glow of the screen the only light in the heavy, blanketed room, and started typing out the chronological sequence of the loss. I was describing the tiny triangular mark on my wrist when I paused, distracted by an odd sensation. It wasn't the metallic taste this time, but a faint, almost imperceptible ringing, a high frequency that bypassed my eardrums and seemed to vibrate directly inside my skull. It felt like the prelude to the complete silence I had experienced on the highway. Then, clear as a bell, coming from the attached garage, I heard it. A distinct, sharp, metallic clink. Something heavy had been set down, or dropped. And following that clink, cutting through the high-frequency ringing in my head, was the exact, high-pitched, digitized chirp I had isolated from the corrupted audio recording. I finally understood the truth. They hadn't just taken 45 minutes. They had left something with me, and now, they had returned for it. And they were inside the house.